Limitations are more interesting than capability by Pay Talks Anime.
Action is consistently at the center of anime's biggest shows. The most popular anime genre is battle shonen, and if you have action in a story, it's often filled with characters who can fight. I think this is the norm for good reason, but occasionally shows come along and break the mold. Like, what if you introduced a halfling rogue who, despite being a seasoned adventurer, doesn't have much to any combat experience? Dungeon Meshi, otherwise known as Delicious in Dungeon, has recently been a huge standout favorite of mine, especially when it comes to telling an old story in a new way. Likely because I make these videos and spend so much time thinking about media, I find myself more and more drawn to things that aren't just good, but also interesting. And this show is both. Welcome to a running series called Dungeon Meshi in Depth. My name is Pei, and today we're talking about when limitations are much more interesting than capability. So, to no one's surprise, a show called Dungeon Meshi is built around a common fantasy trope: dungeons. And the series starts by asking and then exploring a bunch of really interesting questions, like what would a dungeon as a self-sustaining ecosystem look like? In a world filled with magic, wouldn't it be viewed more through a classical scientific lens? And if monsters really existed, what would they taste like? This show, in all the best ways, feels like a magical safari. And if we were to realistically ask what it would be like to go into a dark, dangerous dungeon, you'd probably want someone who's familiar as a guide. This leads us to one of Dungeon Meshi's main characters, Chilchuck, a self-preserving, pessimistic halfling rogue, here primarily for the job. A character that throughout the story gets less attention and backstory than the rest of the primary cast. But all of this feels like it might be done intentionally.
I feel that... Let me let him finish.
Not only the story, but also his individual arc.
So I feel that that's kind of a... I feel that's kind of a big misconception in Returns, and I'm agreeing with him, to clarify. I feel that that's a big misconception because a lot of people assume the story has to be bigger and grander and broader, right? Like, the story has to just be this overarching thing, right? Whether Game of Thrones, Robert Jordan, Wheel of Time, Lord of the Rings, Silmarillion, right? Stuff like that, right? And characters have to be like this super in-depth novel of backstory. Sometimes it's okay to be simple, right? I think and maybe that's probably like part of why I like Xenos a lot in terms of Final Fantasy 14, because dude was simple. Dude just didn't understand. Dude could not understand people. Dude didn't feel like he belonged, and was a rather simplistic character that just wanted to test his reflexes to be challenged. Right? He does, like, yeah, he has complexity, right? He has depth, but I mean, motivations are pretty simple, right? You can have simplistic characters, and that's fine. You can have a self-preserving, pessimistic non-combatant who's just really skilled at cooking, and it's how you work with it, right? It's making it believable. It's making it that way they feel like a character rather than, oh, well, he's just the token non-combatant character, or he's just token insert character race here, right? Like, the art of writing, I feel, becomes more and more lost because characters feel less like characters and they feel more like billboards for something, at least when we talk about like Western media in a lot of ways, right? I don't know. It's interesting to think about.
The characteristic we're focusing on today is his reluctance to fight. We're going to look into how this ties into Dungeon Meshi's plot, storytelling as a larger structure, and finally Chilchuck's character, because it ties into all three in a really interesting way. Dungeon Meshi is a story that breaks a lot of common storytelling structure and expectations. It demonstrates that telling can be just as interesting as showing. It demonstrates that a magical world doesn't have to feel mystical, hidden behind a thick layer of questions and mystery. It's a story where monsters are parts of ecosystems and magic is a type of science. Because if characters really did exist in a magical world, they wouldn't treat magic like it was some special different thing. It would likely be used as another tool and viewed in the same way we might look at electricity, magnets, or computers. There's a common argument in writing education that stories need to feel realistic, not be it. The pursuit of realism can very quickly get in the way of a story. But just because realism in many cases isn't fun doesn't mean it can't be. I think Dungeon Meshi appeals to me in the same way an outstanding documentary does, or a great video essay. Passion is interesting, and Dungeon Meshi is built off of that beautifully. So this is a story that really benefits from an intuitive realism, building from things that we understand in our world. That's why creating an adventuring group where people have very real specialties makes a lot of sense. Submarines have operations, weapons, and engineering departments. They have highly specialized people in specific skills because they're going to be stuck with them for a long period of time in a dangerous environment. So in Dungeon Meshi, when they're going into these dungeons, having someone that's specialized in identifying and disarming traps is really important. The main crew literally gets lost in the first episode, and it sets up the inciting incident. Chulchuk, despite not being able to fight, consistently contributes to the party's dungeon crawl. Which leads to the second question: why is this such an outlier? Coming back to that idea that realism can be fun, but it often isn't, I think a lot of battle shonen is built around agency and characters being able to contribute and participate. When every Straw Hat pirate finds a way to participate in a major moment in the story, it's more interesting than having characters sitting around who can't do anything. When things exist,
I wonder if that's the Naruto effect, right? Because so we had the Konoha 11, right? But I mean, and obviously the story is focused, especially when we go into like Shippuden, right? And how we have, Sai joining Team 11, and Team 11 tries to go out and find Sasuke. And you kind of have the flip flop between Sasuke's POV and stuff. And it's like we have characters like Anko, and like it's not like Anko got forgotten, right? It's like she ended up playing a part down the line when she was hunting for Orochimaru and got kidnapped by Kabuto, and she actually played a role in because of her curse mark, bringing Orochimaru back. And like, I think, or a criticism I have heard of Bleach is that Tite Kubo had too many characters. Whether that's true or not, I can't really say personally. I'm very far behind. I'm still in Wako Mundo arc, if I'm being honest. I just haven't had time to really dive into more of it. I've been in Wako Mundo for years. But it's definitely one of those things where you can have too much of a cast, but you can also have too little of a cast. And like, it's fine to have different cast members. And I think part of like, I say Naruto because shonen anime, right, on blend, well, anime / manga, right? So it's kind of on theme, right? But it's like, you like being able to see when Kakashi has something to add to the situation, right? Land of Waves arc, right? Kakashi wants to protect his students, right? And that's why he goes, throws fists with Zabuza, right? You have Zabuza, in the whole Gato situation where Haku's already taken out of the fight. And Zabuza doesn't want them to speak any further, and he will take care of Gato himself, right? I mean, there's a number, like, we like seeing characters act, but we like seeing them act and react in ways that make sense, right? And we like it when there's logic, and we like it when there's rhyme and reason to things, right? Like, why can Kakashi use water style, right? Well, it's because he's a Jonin. He also has access to the Sharingan, which makes it easier for him to pick up on things. If I remember correctly, I think he has all 5 nature transformations, which is, it's a thing. Not everybody can do it, right? But he's also Kage level, effectively. Whereas you see people like Naruto who just effectively use, bland, flavorless chakra, Shadow Clone Jutsu and Rasengan, right? Which is just compressed chakra, like the Bijudama, to the point where, he eventually taps into wind style, right? And then, Sage of Six Passions, he gets access to things such as advanced nature releases, like magnet release and stuff, but that's beside the point, right? But you notice where people start having issues when everyone has a Rinnegan, Deus Ex Machina that can pull out, when everybody has a Susanoo, which, Kurama Avatar, right? You could kind of, it's Susanoo adjacent, let's be honest, right? It is a ethereal force that surrounds you. And when things start getting a little mixed and a little muddled, people start to kind of lose the plot a little bit, right? Having that risk, having that reward. It's fine to have a just world-ending ability, but they better have a charge time that lasts like 5 episodes that can be foiled if these get so much as touched, right? Like, have realistic standards, right? And I think that's what a lot of media can. And I know people will talk about, Western media, the Rey Skywalker effect, and it's like, I guess we can, from an action movie standpoint, I guess we can kind of compare the two. And it's more so that she really doesn't have progression and training that becomes my issue. That's fine. Like, forge your own identity. That's fine. Be a Skywalker than a Palpatine. I understand the choice being made there. The issue I more so run into is the lack of a character arc that makes sense, and it just kind of invalidates the struggle that Luke went through. And that being said, it's fine. Like, there are characters that'll come along in later arcs of anime series all the time, and they'll pick up on things naturally. And part of that's because it has to handwave how, you know, character in season 4 can interact with a character who's been growing consistently for 4 seasons, right? Like, think like the Sound 4 from Naruto, right? Or you have, you know, how can, you know, how are a lot of these Jonin and Kage level opponents being stopped in the 4th Great Shinobi War, right? Where you have Edo Tensei puppets, right? Well, and now the Edo Tensei puppets can, you know, reach self-actualization, kind of like Sasori did, or Sasori, excuse me, and, you know, kind of like just nah, I'm out, K thanks fam, out of Edo Tensei, right? But then that obviously gets addressed in regards to Kabuto being able to lock someone down, right? Or Madara being able to sever the summoning contract with the actual caster, the Jutsu i.e. Kabuto. So it's interesting to consider, and I think people want to engage in these systems where things just make sense. If you want to point to a big fault that Star Wars has, because we've talked about it, guess what? Lightsabers aren't lethal anymore. Lightsabers don't do anything, right? Back when it was Star Wars, before it was episode 4, right? And even obviously episode 4, right? Dude gets his arm cut off. Cool. Like, okay, this thing is an actual saber. Grats. You know, someone getting, you know, limbs chopped, ran through, right? That has weight to it, and it suddenly doesn't. So that also kind of goes into the Naruto and other anime effect, where, like, if there's a resource cost like chakra, and suddenly, you know, chakra seems limitless, right? It's going to throw your audience out, right? If you have a series like this, right, and then suddenly you run into super special awesome who can do no wrong, and you can write something like that. You can have super special awesome who can do no wrong, but then he gets absolutely humbled, right? Or you can have super special awesome, and it's like, well, I don't know, the dude's just there. He's just there for plot convenience. That's when people start to say, okay, this kind of takes you out of a story. It ceases to be interesting.
For good reason, to the point of becoming a standard, that's a trope, which leaves room for subversion. Because when you do something different and then do it well, that adds texture. Both of the fantasy stories I've done large series on use action as an asterisk, not the primary focus. I think it's a pretty agreed upon perspective that neither Frieren Beyond Journey's End or Dungeon Meshi are shows that prioritize action. They're both character and setting driven. Because this decision to have Chilchuk be one of the only characters that can't really contribute to a fight represents this larger writing prowess that makes me love Dungeon Meshi. Choosing to do something very specific and then doing it really well. This is the point in the video where I gotta start including some spoilers, so just a heads up if you haven't seen the show yet. With an ensemble cast filled to the brim with weirdos, Chilchuk brings a very sobering energy. He's practical, reserved, anxious, and aware. He pays attention to what is immediately in front of him. His tendency towards self-preservation is a great balancing act for the ridiculousness of the actions some of the other characters take. Chilchuk choosing not to fight represents these traits well. It's not fear, and while it does in some ways come from anxiety and his aversity to risk, it's also just practical and realistic. It's a skill he hasn't developed, it is not his job. Whenever I do character analysis on Dungeon Meshi, I feel the need to point towards this other channel, DM Punk. He does great videos on characters both big and small in this story, and in many cases when I'm talking about characters like this, some of the points I'm making he made first. He has this great point about how Chilchuk's character really comes together with 2 major reveals. First, his age, he's in his mid-30s, and second, that he's a father. There's something really funny about him consistently pushing back against people treating him like a kid, but his personality kind of perfectly aligning with this kind of old man no bullshit attitude. I think part of what makes Chilchuk's refusal to fight so interesting is that it seems to apply to so many different aspects of his character. Even coming full circle in the fact that Chilchuk chose not to leave the party. When other members were realistic about their funds or the possibility of actually saving Fallon together, they made different choices, but Chilchuk stayed with Marcel and Laios. But even given his private nature and realistic pessimism, Chilchuk is invested. And you see that in the multiple times he's forced to contribute to a fight, despite his limited skill set. He doesn't want to put himself in danger, that's not his job, but this has also become more than just a job. There are lots of parallels in the traits that appeal to both DM Punk and me when it comes to Chilchuk's character. He reminds me of the dad who gets coerced into getting a cat by his family, who's incredibly reluctant, but then months in somehow develops a even more loving relationship than the kids who are so excited to receive it. There's like this sincerity in that dynamic that I kind of feel whenever Chilchuck chooses to push himself outside of his standards and comfort zone. It's also cool because when he does choose to participate, he doesn't just magically get good. He figures out what he can do and he does it. It's very...
And that in itself says more about this series than it does so many others, right? Because if you're presented with a challenge and you can just, even if it seems like they're giving effort, right, and they solve it in a way that is either inconsistent with their character or in a way that's just, they just trivialize it, right? Where's the entertainment? Where's the suspense in that, right? Like, yes, we look to things for some sort of realism, even anime and fantasy, right? Like we look for it in terms of like certain anchor points, right? Like, you know, generally having some sort of human or humanoid, you know, characters or races or whatever, right? Being able to find a point of reference, timeless themes such as the bonds of friendship, going above and beyond, overcoming trauma, right? I mean, like, and those can definitely feed into each other, right? It's like, how does he solve this? Does he suddenly pick up a sword and does he, suddenly just solo the encounter? That wouldn't really do a whole lot, right? Would that not compromise the moral of the story? Would it not? I think that's a fair thing to really like take a look at, right? And there is something to be said about like I think it was the Dragon Prince did it, right? Where was it? I can't remember his name, but he was kind of forced to make a decision, I think, at the end of season 2, where he had to crush a grub in his hand and tap into dark magic to be able to stop something. I don't remember what it was specifically. But that is, thus drew ire from the dragons on him because he's a filthy human who uses dark magic by sacrificing creatures, right? Like, you can have a moment like that where a character can compromise their morals and suffer the consequences for it, right? To be broken and shattered and have to build themselves back up. That's 100% a thing that you can work with. Absolutely. But it doesn't necessarily make sense for him to pick up, say, a barbarian axe and just absolutely solo the encounter, right? And to be because he's super special, awesome, or like maybe when he just like zones out or is put in a position, he just has this just godlike ability, right? That's not the case. Seems like from this he's having to be crafty. He's having to use his skill set to do what he can, and that's an intriguing story for people.
Very in line with his character, and that energy is really nice because we get a bunch of big personalities outside of it. He's weird enough to where he fits perfectly within the group, but he's also in some ways the voice of reason. That's what makes it so cool when he plays along. On paper, Dungeon Meshi is chock full of things I didn't think I would be interested in, like dungeons and halfling rogues that refuse to fight. But all of these little things add up until you have this mountain of small story details that are just so expansive. It's not just Chilchuck's refusal to fight, it's also the attention to detail with Marcel's hair, or Laios saying cool before being horrified by his sister's transformation. It's in the fun secondhand account of Laios' party through Kabaru. There's all these little things that add up, and in most other stories they'd either be functional or insignificant. But not Dungeon Meshi. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next week.
And I think that's what it sounds like is where the emphasis is. You can have a grand overarching narrative, but you can also, focus on a more focused experience, right? You can focus on different things, right? Like, so you're not necessarily worried about the geopolitics of other countries in the setting and worried about, earth-shattering events. It's okay to get to know others in an intimate setting, other characters, right? And I use intimate in kind of like a generalized, standpoint, right? Rather than they are just character number 2376. They are that character. These are their strengths. These are their weaknesses. These are the things that they struggle with, right? And there's something special about that. So I honestly enjoyed this. I thought it was really cool. I definitely could add a lot more to this, but I feel like I've really tacked on a lot to this. And ultimately, like, even if you find, super special, awesome, can do no wrong, even if you find them in some way, shape, or form entertaining, like, that's fine. You're allowed to do that. But these are the things that make the differences in stories for many people. And obviously that's going to be subjective. We should definitely be making sure to praise good writing before we see it, good writing when we see it, and be able to, kind of celebrate these things rather than being part of a cycle, especially online, that just beats people down, and just beats and deconstructs the very things that you like. So Come to your own conclusion. Thank you, everyone. I really do appreciate it. I had a lot of fun with this. And hopefully, you have a wonderful rest of your day.